Have you ever wondered what actually separates the ultra wealthy from the middle class? I mean, is it really just a bigger paycheck, a massive trust fund, or maybe it's just sheer dumb luck? Well, what if I told you it's actually a fundamental psychological gap in how these two groups perceive risk, security, and opportunity? Today, I'm going to ask you to challenge some of your own baseline assumptions about money, safety, and what it really takes to succeed. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're dissecting the psychology of wealth, risk, illusion, and the anatomy of failure. We are pulling together some truly fascinating financial advisory data, brand new academic research on behavioral economics, and the raw, unfiltered personal stories of self-made billionaires to figure out exactly how wealth is built and, just as importantly, how it's lost. So let's dive right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the wealth mindset divide. Second, the inheritance illusion. Third, the long-term care trap. Fourth, billionaires and failure. And finally, number 5, the asymmetric payoff.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the wealth mindset divide, middle class versus wealthy. When we look at the data from Wiser Advisor, you can see this totally stark contrast in investment strategies right out of the gate. For the middle class, the focus is heavily geared towards safety. We're talking about your standard blue chip stocks, CDs, and that ultimate middle class milestone, owning a primary residence. But then you look at the wealthy, and their portfolios are playing a completely different game. They're allocating massive chunks of their wealth to high-risk instruments like hedge funds and private equity. Instead of just owning the home they live in, they own diverse, income-generating commercial real estate. And crucially, they actively seek autonomy by owning businesses. So what does this all mean? It boils down to a core psychological divide. For the middle class, financial decisions are often heavily constrained by a very real, honestly very paralyzing fear of losing hard-earned money. The whole goal is to play it safe, maintain a certain lifestyle, and basically just avoid disaster. But the wealthy, they operate fearlessly. They view money not as this fragile little nest egg you have to guard with your life, but as a dynamic tool to seize opportunities. To them, market volatility isn't something to run from. It's literally the exact mechanism you use to generate wealth. Which brings us to a really fascinating plot twist. Section 2, the inheritance illusion, borrowing against ghosts. Recent academic research from the Open Science Framework reveals a pretty staggering reality. Get this, 52.9% of survey respondents expect to receive a substantial inheritance. And they aren't expecting just a little token amount either. The mean expected windfall is nearly $280,000. Just think about that for a second. More than half the population is walking around right now expecting a massive six-figure payday to just miraculously drop into their laps at some point down the road. And here is where it becomes a huge problem. The mere expectation of this phantom money drastically alters how people behave today, long before a single dollar actually hits their checking account. The research shows that people who expect an inheritance act way less cautiously. They save significantly less money overall. They save less for retirement, they're far more willing to take on debt, and they do significantly less planning for their own financial futures. Basically, they are borrowing against a ghost. But it doesn't stop at their bank accounts, right? This illusion bleeds straight into their day jobs. The data reveals that individuals expecting an inheritance actually report working fewer hours. They put less effort into their careers, and they focus less on maximizing their earning potential. Why? Well, because they feel this inflated, totally false sense of security, so they just kind of coast. They play it safe in the present because they assume a big financial rescue boat is coming for them in the future. But here is where that illusion violently shatters for so many families. Section 3, the long-term care trap, the brutal reality check. Take a look at this number. This is a tough pill to swallow, but according to the research, nearly 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will require some form of intensive long-term care. We're talking nursing homes or specialized in-home care. And the out-of-pocket costs for this, they frequently and dramatically blow right past the $100,000 mark. And here's the kicker that catches everyone off guard. Medicare often does not cover these expenses. Families are totally shocked to discover that their parents must completely exhaust their personal savings and assets before Medicaid assistance even kicks in. So relying on that $280,000 unearned windfall, it's a massive, massive gamble. By the time the medical and caregiving bills are fully paid out, estates are frequently wiped clean, zeroed out. The adult children who saved less and coasted at work are left with absolutely nothing. Turns out, playing it safe and waiting for a rescue is actually the riskiest move you can possibly make. So, if coasting is a trap, how is monumental wealth actually built? Let's shift gears to Section 4, Billionaires and Failure, a tolerance for rejection. Let's start with Warren Buffett. When people ask him about his biggest mistakes, he actually doesn't point to investments that tanked and lost him money. He says his biggest errors are mistakes of omission, the things he knew enough to do, but didn't do because he was just being too cautious. He admits to missing out on perhaps $10 billion in profits because, in his own words, he was sucking his thumb when he should have been writing checks. For Buffett, the real failure isn't losing. It's the missed opportunity caused by playing it too safe. Then you have Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. His string of failures is absolutely wild. He failed his university entrance exams 3 separate times. He applied to Harvard 10 times and was rejected every single time. He applied for 30 different jobs and was turned down for all of them. Get this, when KFC came to his city, 24 people applied for a job. 23 were hired. He was literally the only person rejected by KFC. But he weaponized this rejection. When venture capitalists called his ideas crazy, he embraced the nickname Crazy Jack. He figured if everyone agreed with him, there wouldn't be any opportunity left anyway. Jeff Bezos faced the exact same wall of rejection when he was trying to get Amazon off the ground. To raise just $1 million back in 1994, he had to take 60 different meetings just to get 20 people to agree to put in 50 grand each. 40 people looked him in the eye and said no. And the most common question he got in those meetings? What's the internet? Bezos always points out that invention and failure are inseparable twins. You simply cannot pioneer anything new if you're terrified of the embarrassment of failing. And we definitely can't talk about risk without looking at Elon Musk's absolutely brutal year in 2008. It perfectly visualizes the edge of the cliff reality of entrepreneurship. SpaceX had just suffered its 3rd consecutive launch failure. They were completely out of money. Musk was living in Silicon Valley with basically nothing, sleeping on the floor of the office and showering at the local YMCA. Meanwhile, Tesla was bleeding cash during the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Survival was literally fought for hour by hour. At 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve in 2008, a last-hour financing deal saved Tesla from going bankrupt just days later. That is what taking a true risk looks like. Let's tie all of these threads together to reveal the ultimate mental framework of the ultra-wealthy in Section 5, the asymmetric payoff, scoring 1,000 runs. Jeff Bezos uses this really profound analogy that hits the nail on the head. In baseball, no matter how perfectly you connect with that ball, the absolute maximum reward you can possibly get is a grand slam. 4 runs. Success is strictly capped. But business and investing, they are a completely different ballgame. In business, every once in a while, you step up to the plate, you take a massive swing, and you hit the ball so hard, it yields 1,000 runs. The potential upside is totally, completely uncapped. And this explains exactly why the ultra-wealthy are perfectly fine with striking out so often. They don't view failure as a reflection of their personal worth. They view it as an essential experiment. Bezos says that if you're ever offered a bet with a 10% chance of a 100x return, you have to take that bet every single time. Mathematically, it's a no-brainer. But psychologically, man, it means you're still going to be wrong 9 out of 10 times, and it is going to feel terrible 9 out of 10 times. True wealth building isn't about perfectly avoiding mistakes. It's about structuring your risk so that your rare, massive wins completely obliterate those frequent, necessary failures. So, I want to leave you with this final thought today. Take a hard look at your own decisions, your own mindset, and maybe even the illusions you might be clinging to just for comfort. Are you structuring your life to safely avoid failure? Waiting for an inheritance, sticking only to what feels secure, and playing just so you don't lose? Or are you actually willing to endure the discomfort, embrace the risk, and take the swings necessary to score 1,000 runs? The choice is entirely up to you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.